right, people, we are back in Napoleon, and my note to self today, I think, was we were supposed to do our quick write, but we're going to do that tomorrow because I got too far down a rabbit hole with Bernie memes. I'm making a PowerPoint presentation of all of my Bernie memes in categories like pop culture, historical Bernie, being made into Bernie. Somebody made the Mona Lisa with the mask, glasses, and gloves. It's awesome. I am going to present this. You have to go through it and watch it, Maddie, even though you roll your eyes in disgust.
No, I'm very excited.
Okay.
I think it is very much I don't know if he was doing it as a standpoint, but that's kind of what it feels like. That he's wearing like the same gloves and coat that he is and everything else, while everyone else is in head to toe.
Well, there's also a category of teacher memes that I don't know that non-teacher people get with that whole same look, like coming into the faculty meeting with your papers to grade. That was what I thought. Like he's going to sit there and grade papers while he's listening to the inauguration. Yes.
Michelle's mama looked so good.
Oh my yes. And it was all beautiful, but him like being in very like plain clothes and like the same mask that all of us are wearing just felt very like on brand for Bernie.
All right. So page 4, we are still continuing the situation that Napoleon is in to fix France. And if we can really stop for a second and make sure that we understand that Napoleon was put there by, at the end, it's this word called a plebiscite. And a plebiscite is a popular vote. And the people of France elected Napoleon to fix all this stuff. And so they kind of give him a wide leeway of things to do to fix it. And again, he's an enlightened despot in the best situation. He's an enlightened despot when he starts, but he's going to move quickly and slowly to a dictator. But at this point, he's trying to fix things the best that he can without losing any power himself. So that's where he's at. The next thing that he really has to fix that's very difficult, that has plagued France for much longer than the French Revolution, is the economy. So the economy has to be fixed. Napoleon is not an economist. That is not his strong suit. He is a military man, and he approaches all of his tasks, all of his difficulties as a military person. And as a person who has grown up with a dad who's a military person and a husband who's a military person, it's something that's just ingrained. And as a result, ingrained in me, like certain things I think I've mentioned. I don't walk on the grass. I don't walk on the opposite side of the sidewalk. People drive me nuts that walk on the wrong side of the sidewalk, because if you walk, you have to walk. So on military bases, everybody has to walk so that their saluting hand is to the outside. So your saluting hand is your right hand. So that always has to be out. So it can't be impeded when you have to give or return a salute. Same thing. It's just things ingrained in you that you don't even know is happening. Every day on military bases around the world, colors is played twice a day. Once to put up the flag, and then at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, depending on what bases you're at, the flag goes down. And if you're out when they drop colors, you stop. Everybody stops. We all stop. I've stopped my whole life as a kid. In the middle of swinging, you jump out of the swing and stop and stand. Nobody talks. And then forever. Cars stop, everything stops on a military base for a rise. That's the ingrained part of you that you don't even know that you do. We had theaters on base all the time, and every movie started with the playing of the Star Spangled Banner, and everybody in the movie theater stood up. The very first time that I was on a date that I went to a movie theater that was not with my date, who was not. And the curtains opened and I stood up in front of the whole movie theater. And my date's like, "What are you doing?" "National anthem." "What?" "No." "Oh, let me just sit back down." So that ideas of how you act are ingrained, and especially in Napoleon, that's his whole makeup. So everything he approaches is from that standpoint. Yes.
If this is like too off what we're doing, why can we have military bases in other countries, but other countries can't have military bases here?
Ooh, good question. It's because of NATO. NATO is a North Atlantic Treaty Organization that is based on protecting Europe. And so that's what we do. We protect Europe. And no, we do not allow. That is an excellent question, but no, we don't allow. We have joint ventures, and there are definitely military people in the United States from other countries, but not bases. No, we do not. That's our rank of superiority, that we are the lead. We are the lead of that treaty of NATO. And so, yes, we have those bases. Now, like, for instance, the base that I lived at in West Germany, Ramstein Air Force Base, that was NATO headquarters. So even though that wasn't technically American, I guess it is really American soil, there were other people, there were other countries attached to that base. There were French, Canadian, British, Spanish, all kinds at that base because it's headquarters of NATO. But that's a very good question, and that's the very easy answer because we would never allow it. And we created NATO to protect, and we are going to get there eventually because that's our last chapter. NATO, because NATO is really more important to Europe than it is to the United States, but it's a protection against the spread of communism. That's essentially what it was created for. The North Atlantic Treaty was to prevent the spread of communism as the Soviet Union and China start to move. And go ahead.
Will that affect people who are like pushing for democratic socialism?
Does that what?
Will that like affect people who are pushing for like democratic socialism?
Now?
Yeah.
No.
I didn't know if that they were going to.
No,
like,
that's never an issue. No.
Right.
It's a protection. It's, and what has happened now is that NATO has gotten much larger. I mean, huge. Countries that I can't even think about that we let into NATO are in NATO. Like Poland. Like, I can't even fathom that Poland is in NATO because Poland was part of a Soviet bloc country. It's the success of NATO that the Warsaw Pact and communism fell. It's probably the greatest accomplishment of NATO.
And Trump didn't leave that.
He can't.
He left the Paris.
That is entered too freely, but you can't leave NATO. No, not going to happen. All right. So that big long story to get to financial unity and what Napoleon tries to muddle through in his military mind to get France back on track. He has a disaster that he has inherited. The first thing that needs to be done is there needs to be a Bank of France, and that will be what he does in 1800. The Bank of France serves the interests of the state and the financial oligarchy. An oligarchy is a few. Why do you need a bank like that? Every country has a bank like that, right? We've already talked about the Bank of England. The Bank of England's been around for a long time. It does a couple of things. One, when you collect taxes, you need a place to put it. In the United States, we have the Federal Reserve. We have a national bank where the government puts its money. And I know that's kind of hard to think about, but a government needs a stable place to put its money. A government also needs a stable place in which to borrow money. So when France collects taxes, it goes into the bank and it gains interest, right? That's an essential part of that discussion. Balance the national budget. And that, again, is a difficult thing to do. And that will be one of the things that he will work on. Establish sound currency and public credit. And again, if you don't have currency that the population believes in, it doesn't matter how much you have or what you do. If it doesn't have a strong backing, and that would be the Bank of France, it doesn't work. Economic reform to stimulate the economy. D is the hard part, and that's where you want to put a box around, again, this idea of how an economy works. And it is a difficult thing because some of the things that you have to do to stimulate the economy also causes a large amount of debt. It's just this hamster on a wheel going round and round. So if he provides food at low cost, what is that going to do to the profit for farmers, right? It's going to go down. So there has to be give and take in this hamster on a wheel running around and around. Increased employment means he has to create jobs. And in creating jobs, someone has to pay the salary. So again, that is definitely not a positive. So provided food at low cost is going to hit farmers hard, so he has to do something to help farmers. So then he lowers the taxes for farmers. Does that make sense? So if you keep prices flat for farmers, they aren't earning a profit. You've got to give them something that allows them to earn money. So what you do is you lower their taxes, just farmers. Guaranteed that church lands redistributed during the revolution remained in the hands of their owners. That's mostly peasants, which give an entire group of people land ownership that never would have been able to obtain that. Created an independent peasantry that would be the backbone of the French democracy, meaning those peasants aren't attached to feudal dues, feudal lands, or any kind of feudal requirements as attached to a manor or a lord. Yes?
So the food goes for low prices, but then that obviously affects the farmers. So they lower the farmers' taxes so they can just have the same amount.
Right.
Okay.
So that just evens everything out for the farmers in that aspect and what will happen and what the motivation is that eventually year after year it will get better and better, and so we'll get back in more of a free market economy and not having these prices dictated. Tax collections become more efficient, and most importantly, again, workers not allowed to form guilds. That has nothing to do with the economy. That has 100% to do with we don't want large groups of people gathering that could do anything to refuel the fire of the French Revolution. We want that thing to die. It needs to die and go back and not come back again. The next part of this is a public education system. And again, when we think about public education, especially in this early time period, it isn't the idea of what we think public education is to create well-rounded citizens that are productive. This really becomes part of the indoctrination of removing any of these revolutionary thoughts and ideas. So education reforms based on a system of public education under state control. Most education in France prior to Napoleon was done through the church. Monasteries was the only education that was really viable, especially to wealthy, especially to people that wanted their children to be educated. Napoleon takes that away from the church, puts it in the hands of the state, and then applies rigorous standards to those teachers and those schools. What are you going to teach? We have to have a curriculum. And then that becomes available to the masses. And again, we don't want them to be taught any kind of subversive type of education. We want to make sure that it's done to, as it says in B, prepare young men for government service and professional occupations. It's not about learning how to think. It's not about learning Voltaire or any of those types of rhetoric that that brought about the French Revolution. Yes.
So it's just men.
Yes, at this point. Higher education, that's secondary.
Okay.
Everybody gets, so secondary is what we would call high school. So everyone's going to get up to about a fifth or junior high education, boys and girls, but not taught at the same schools or in the same classes. They're still segregated. Secondary and higher ed. So education becomes important in determining social status. One system who could spend 12 or more years at school, the other for boys that entered the workforce at 12 or 14. And that again sets up really what is the education system in most every other country except ours, that there are two education tracks. Up to fourth grade, everybody's together, and then boom, we go off into two rows. You either are you either pass the test and you continue in academic education, or you are then sent to a vocational school to learn a trade. That's pretty much the way every single country does their school system except for ours, which is why we always fall so low in rankings, because everybody in the United States is pitted up against the top 10% of every country. And that's why we never are in those top categories, because our testing includes all of those people that pick C for every answer, or draw cats with their Scantron, or sleeps through the test, or doesn't take their education seriously. That goes into our numbers as the top 10% of everyone else's. So states and countries around the world make a really big decision on their education dollars, and they don't spend them on everybody. They spend them on those people who respond. Everyone else learns a trade. Does anybody want to ask me, why do we do that? Why do we do that? Because there are people, my husband would be one, who did not do well in high school, not because of any idea of academic pursuits, but because he was the fifth boy of a single mom that was a nurse, and his requirements for high school was to graduate and not get anybody pregnant, because she was like, I'm done. You boys are wild as heck. My husband, that's what he did. And then when he got to college and got to take classes that he wanted to, he's like the smartest dude ever. Had to walk around with his dean's list paper because nobody believed him at all. He also had, and thankfully I'm not one of these teachers, probably because of my husband, but any of you that are siblings of other people, you know, there is attachments that go with you, good and negative, and my husband's was definitely negative. Are you the last one? Are there any more of you? Please tell me you are the last Norris boy that I'm ever going to see, ever. Yes?
Did he go here?
No, he's California. Yeah, not from here. None of us are from here. And so that's what the United States does. We believe in the possibility and the opportunity for all. And that, again, is why in a democracy you hear that word opportunity often, that everyone should have an equal opportunity. And that equal opportunity is education, and it is the difference maker between what is offered in most European countries. Have I told you guys a story about when I had the guest speaker for my geography class? Yeah. So the table, yeah, the dumb school where they make tables, yeah. So that's the idea of this, that the dollars that we spend need to be spent, and the idea of a democracy is everyone has equal access and equal opportunity, and so that's why that changes.
It doesn't really have anything to do with this, but like, if you're like not from here, why are you like here? Like not like me. Why are you here? It wasn't meant me. But, like,
because it is a very, very short story. It is a thing called earthquakes. They are truly the most devastating thing. I've been in every natural disaster except a flood. I've been in everything. I've been in tornadoes. I've been in hurricanes. I've been in typhoons. I've been in earthquakes. Of all of those things, an earthquake is and I said, I cannot raise children and send them to school. What?
I've only been in a flood.
Yeah, I've never been in a flood. Like a real flood, like flood up to in your water and house. Yeah, I've not been. No.
My grandma lives in this like okay, my great grandma's here. There's all these fields in Prairieton.
Oh, Prairieton. Well, everything in Prairieton's a flood zone.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
And then my great grandma's house is up on a hill above the fields, and my grandma's house flooded because it was in that like basin with the fields. Then
Yep.
I was at her house, and everyone had to like retreat
Yeah.
to my great grandma's house.
Yeah.
I have a question.
And no one
I
could
mean,
get
anywhere. You
like
need to solve
6
it.
feet apart.
Okay, so why was it here?
Yeah.
So the company that my husband worked for in California were building power plants out here in Indiana. So that's why. So like my husband's built like maybe 7 power plants out here. There's one in West Terre Haute that he built. There's one in Wheatland. And I don't know if you go down, if you're like going to Bloomington and take the left at Switz City and there's like a power plant back, that Wheatland power plant he built for Hoosier. So yeah, that's why. That's what my husband does. He builds power plants.
Did you work on the
What?
Did you work on the Miram?
No, Miriam's been here for too long. Yeah, these are all Miriam. My husband is natural gas, so not coal fired. He doesn't do any coal fire plants, which is why they all sprung up right here in the time period of second Bush and Obama in getting rid of coal-fired power plants, which is why Miriam's closing, because it can't keep up with natural gas anymore.
Aren't they closing?
Yeah.
Aren't they like getting bought out again?
And the reason being is because natural gas is so much cheaper than coal. Natural gas is like pennies versus coal. So
Nobody
yeah.
really knows what's going on, but
It's closing.
It's closing. Yeah.
Mhm.
I thought somebody was like buying it, like another
No.
company.
Nobody's going to buy it. It's too
Yeah,
old.
because we were looking at this house over there, and then they tore it down because of that. And my mom was like, "You guys are closing."
Yeah. And there's too much environmental stuff left over. There's a big ash pond that's there. Yeah. So no, it won't. It's too old of a power plant. Even if there was still coal viable, it's just too old. Once a power plant gets past a certain time period, it's not worth fixing. It's easier to rebuild than to fix. So anyway.
Does Hoosier have natural gas?
What?
Does Hoosier like have natural
Yeah.
gas?
Well, Wheatland is natural gas. That's all the peaker plants that they built. So they have natural gas. And I actually think Rats might be a combined cycle, that it's coal and natural gas.
God, I
I'm
feel
not
bad
sure.
For all the Rats people who just got here like last year.
Yeah.
The bad time.
Yep.
Bad.
Okay, so education and just power plant education. But yeah, it was in 1994, there was a giant earthquake. It's the Northridge earthquake. And that was it for me. We had lots of earthquakes. I was all right with the little teeny ones, but that Northridge one, 63 people died, the freeway collapsed. I'm like, nope, I'm done. Get me out of this place.
So, did you say California?
Yes. And then all my California friends was like, yeah, but tornadoes. I'm like, yeah, but they're coming, and you got a basement and you go down there. Because we had tornadoes in Texas, lots of them. I actually had one while we were at school.
My trampoline, when we lived in Texas,
Yeah.
my trampoline wasn't in my backyard when I woke up.
Right.
I have.
We actually had one while I was at school.
There was like a whole week where we couldn't go to school because there were just tornadoes one after the
Mm-hmm.
other.
That's in Illinois a couple years ago. My cousin woke up and their trampoline was like,
Yeah.
it was like 2 miles away.
Yeah.
The trampoline was just gone.
All right, our last thing that we need to talk about before we get to Napoleon and all of his wars, because that is the other part. We talked about one of the difficulties of the French Revolution was that while they were having this revolution, they were also fighting everybody in Europe. Napoleon's going to continue that. Except he's going to be way more successful. And the top of page 5 is one of the things that Napoleon creates that is definitely not a part of a democracy or a republic or anything else. It is the creation of a police state. So what makes this different than a regular police force is the idea of 6A. It's not really a protect and serve. It is a spy system to keep citizens under constant surveillance. So the police in a democracy have the right to surveil people, to listen to their phone conversations, to wiretap their phones, to put a GPS on their car. But they have to go through procedures to do that. They have to go to court and they have to provide evidence that says this person is at risk, or this person, you can't just keep an entire population because you think they might be doing something. That's what a police state does. 6B, political suspects held in state prisons. And so if you speak out against the government, I can put you in jail and I can hold you in jail. I don't have to try you. I don't have to tell you why you're there. I can just hold you. At one point in 1814, Napoleon's highest apex of his power, he's going to have 2,500 political prisoners. So imagine if every time someone spoke out against whatever you did, you could put them in prison. Again, that is not anything remotely close to a republic that the French Revolution was working toward. Ruthlessly put down opposition. Most publicly notorious action was 1804 arrest and execution of a Bourbon the Duke who had took part in a plot against Napoleon. No evidence that he was involved. It was just the idea of getting rid of someone that stood for something else. Police states are always bad. There is never a positive thing about a government using the police as a form of control, as a form of intimidation. Police have all of those abilities to do things. They can listen to people's phones, they can put GPSs, they can arrest political, but it is all done within the confines of a legal system that says you must do this, you can do that. If you arrest someone, you have to tell them why. If you're arrested in the state of Indiana, you have to be charged with a crime within 72 hours, not just put in jail and set there forever. That's the way a republic and a democracy works with a police force. Notice I'm using very different words. A police force versus a police state. It's very different. And those two things are what separate democracies from dictatorships. Our last thing we'll look at on page 5 are drawbacks of Napoleon's reform. And you need to be able to come up with at least 2 or 3 of these in any kind of writing where you have to do positive and negative. Severe inequality for women. Any steps forward that women took under the French Revolution, and they took a lot of forward steps, giant steps forward, all retreated. Every single one of them retreated back. Workers not allowed to form trade unions. And again, that is significant both for people in the trade unions wanting to bring about changes in their workplace, but also the reason, the intent was to keep people from any kind of groups talking about government or government reform. Repressed liberty, subverted republicanism, and restored absolutism in France with the creation of the police state. That's all those things that the police state does. And again, anytime you have a police that operates in secret, that's the other problem. And I would add that up there to the creation of the police state, that it's also secret. You don't know who's in it. You don't know anything about any activity. The police that operate in Sullivan County, both in the Sheriff's Department and the City Police of Sullivan, have to operate with a degree of public transparency. You can go into both City Hall or the courthouse and ask for any arrest records. They're public record. They have to be. It's why they don't have to release names of certain individuals, but that's why all of that's put in the newspaper, who's arrested and why they're arrested. Yes.
Do they have to tell you if people are being detained?
Do they have to what?
Tell you, like, if they're detaining someone?
If they're what?
Like, detaining someone.
No, you have 72 hours for that. So if you're arrested, you have to be charged with something. If they're detaining you, they have to charge you with something within 72 hours, and that is not.
Okay, I'm like, sorry. That's with the protest in Detroit when they put all the people in the Little Caesar Center.
Correct. They're being
Okay.
detained.
So that was fine. I mean, it wasn't fine, but like.
It depends on what every state has different laws about how long, because the Constitution is vague on the right to a speedy trial. What does that mean, right? What does speed mean? So we've all the states have kind of agreed, and I think Indiana is the one with the longest. Is 72 hours 3 days? Okay, 3 days. So that's probably the longest that you can be detained. Some states have it 24. Some states have it 48. But that's the reason that sometimes, to the opposite effect, the wheels of justice seem to be so slow, because they have one opportunity. So let's pretend that you did kill someone and we've been watching you and we arrest you, but we're not sure that we have all the evidence that we need. But within that 72 hours, we either have to tell you why we arrest you or we have to let you go. Well, once we arrest you, the object is for us to charge you and keep you. But if we have to let you go, that gives you the opportunity to cover up stuff, right? So that's why, sometimes there's
So why they wait so long?
that, yeah, and it's not that they're waiting so long. It's just that they have that opportunity. And once you're arrested, they have to tell you why. And if the prosecutor doesn't say, yep, and they have to let you go back out, that gives you the opportunity to cover up anything. So that's why it appears that the wheels of justice move slow, but they move slow because of both constitutionally protecting the accused and constitutionally protecting the police and what they have to do. So that's why being detained is just a way of, usually being detained, especially in that, is just a way of diffusing something. And let's just stop all this and get here. Also, you can be detained for waiting for a search warrant. So like if you're driving your vehicle, and I never advise you to do this because this is what's going to happen to you, and they pull you over and they say, can we search your vehicle? You have the right to say no. Don't do that, because then you're going to be detained while they wait for a search warrant. So you can always say no. No, you don't have the right to search my car. And then they can detain you to get a search warrant, which means you're just going to stay on the side of the road. And what maybe have been a search of about 20 minutes is not going to be a search of 5 hours because you said no. But that is always your right to say no, except in this building. You have no rights in this building. We can look at anything we want. You should know that too, that your cars, when you guys drive your cars, they can be searched. Hello? Yes. Okay.
Goodbye, Callie.
Is this Brace's day? Okay. Yeah, if you drive your cars on campus, we can look at anything. All right. Anybody have any other questions?